who succeeded to develop neurosurgery, the WFNS regional training centers, and then there are some other training systems. I would like to mention some of them. Look, for example, these multinational regional training systems, which are developed in two large African, sub-Saharan African regions by the Surgical College of Surgery. The most important one is developed by the WACS, the West African College of Surgery, and the other one by the College of Surgeons for East, Central, and South Africa. This system has two steps. First, the residents go to general surgery for 2 years. They get some kind of qualification in general surgery, and then they go to neurosurgery for 4 or 5 years. And this system is, of course, what started many years ago, as these colleges were there by 1960, but the number of neurosurgeons is unfortunately very, very reduced as a result of this training. There are another training system which I called an hybrid training system, which is a system which is developed by our European or American colleagues in African country. And there are, for example, two examples. One is in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, who is being developed since more than 2 decades by the Norwegian neurosurgeons. And the other one is in Ethiopia, in Uganda, which is under development since more than 10 years by the American neurosurgeons. There are some other systems, mainly the missionary systems, which are trying to educate for a short period of time either neurosurgeons or mainly general surgeons to perform some emergency procedures needed, of course, in different places. We tried to make some comparison of these 5 training systems, and you will those who have the book can find all the details, and you see this summary with the advantages and disadvantages of these training systems. I have already said the main advantages and disadvantages for some of them, but for example, if we look to the 5 systems, I cannot go to the details, but you can have them as I told you. And the most efficient ones, of course, are the local national training program and the WFNS accredited regional training programs, as I think most of you could understand. So, what is the purpose of the selection of these training systems? To be encouraged to work in this plan to develop neurosurgery for 2030. This plan has a goal to try to increase the ratio of neurosurgeons to 1 neurosurgeon for less than 500,000 people. And to achieve it, we have just to look about what was achieved in the last 2 decades. And you see here that between 2000 and 2017, the number of neurosurgeons in sub-Saharan Africa increased 4.6 times. And if we maintain the same evolution, we will have from now to 2030, 1,697 neurosurgeons in sub-Saharan African region, which give us a ratio of 1 for 700,000 people. Of course, taking in consideration, as you see, the increasing of the population as it increased in the last 2 decades. To try to do more, as I said, we have at least to increase this number by not increasing it 4 or 6 times, but 7 times, which means, and this will give us a ratio of 1 neurosurgeon for 480,000 population, which is quite a respectable ratio. We need to do that. We need just to increase, as you see, the capacity of the training centers, which we have seen already more than 20, to increase this capacity about 30%, 35%. It's really not impossible. I think that this is possible with the participation of all these training centers, trying maybe to create some others with the WFNS, some other regional centers, and I think we can reach this goal. Of course, and as I said, really work in the wishes of the WFNS neurosurgery, same neurosurgery worldwide, and in the wishes of the WHO and the global neurosurgery consensus program. We are, as at any meeting, dedicating a session to speak on the importance of this global neurosurgery. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor El-Khamlichi. Perhaps there may be a question or two for him while I'm calling Professor Richard Perrin, who is our next speaker. Any questions or comments for Professor El-Khamlichi? Okay, we'll do that at the end. So let me introduce Richard Perrin, who has had an extraordinary career in global neurosurgery. He's one of the people who coined the term and really invented this. At the University of Toronto, he and others have made this a hub for training with the Bethune Roundtable, the Labat Lecture. They have hosted many, many international fellows and have also done a great deal of international work. Richard, it's a pleasure to have you here with us, and we're eager to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Bonjour et marhaba. It's a privilege to be here, and I thank you very much for the opportunity. There are a number of North American organizations that have arranged international initiatives, and I'll speak of just 4 of them in which I have myself been involved. The first is the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, the CNS, which international committee has an annual meeting program during which they invite international speakers. It had the bookstore, which is now an anachronism, that, of course, with the advent of electronic media is now obsolete. And the International Fellowship, in which they provided funds for international trainees to come and participate in training in various neurosurgical centers in the United States. The CNS also published the World Directory of Neurological Surgeons, of which I had the dubious distinction of being the last editor of the last hard copy, also now obsolete. And my first experience in Africa was around about the 1980s, when the Congress sent me to Zimbabwe to investigate the possibility of arranging an outreach program there under Dr. Nozipho Marere. And there I met, on your right, the then man who was a sort of a latter-day Albert Schweitzer figure, with his wife Lorraine, who was an oncologist, and Kazadi Kalangu, who worked there, and my accompanying daughter, Brooke, a.k.a. Gorgeous. We became acquainted with many of the heartbreaking stories that I'm sure the people in Africa can identify with, broken promises of projects to be fulfilled, and on that occasion I met with the then Minister of Health, outfitted him in a Congress tie. I'm not sure that anything much came of that, but at any rate, the effort was made to try to improve things in Zimbabwe. On that occasion, I was also taken to this tree. This is the tree that apparently Joshua Nkomo and Robert Mugabe sat under when they plotted the downfall of Rhodesia and the establishment of Zimbabwe. The Foundation for International Neurosurgical Development was an outfit that collected, collated, and distributed equipment and supplies, anything from sutures to shunts, dissectors to drills, Metzenbaums to microscopes. The unfortunate part of this story was that too often the things that were donated, that was the surplus equipment from the United States, turned out to be obsolete or non-functioning, and I was taken to a warehouse where the place was filled with this equipment that was really substandard and not really very useful. When I asked my contact in Harare what would be the best thing for me to bring next time that I come, and he thought a long time and he said, well, actually the best thing you could do is bring a rubber washer. I go out to a town called Bulawayo, and the most urgent need there is fresh water. And the pump that they use, the washer, is broken, so please bring a washer the next time you come. The Foundation for International Education in Neurosurgery has been very active over the years. I served on the board for about 3 decades, and they send volunteers to perform and teach neurosurgery in various countries around the world. Currently led by Robert Dempsey, who has provided very exemplary and innovative leadership and is still a very big going concern. I was involved with the World Federation for about 3 decades, an organization that is proposed to advance neurosurgery in all its aspects, as you see there with the various aspects of its purpose. And this just emphasizes again what you've seen in previous presentations about the huge need for neurosurgeons in sub-Saharan Africa. And these ratios were accurate at the time of my involvement in the around about 2000. And the World Federation at that time decided that they would establish an Assistance Africa initiative. That went along with the missions of education, the provision of an instrument set, the Women in Neurosurgery initiative, and the foundation. Just to talk briefly, the education during that time, Education Committee was headed by Marie Chou and later by Atos Alves de Souza, and they provided courses all over the world where many people in Africa as well came to listen to neurosurgical leaders discussing various aspects of neurosurgery. One of the most important legacies, I think, of Dr. Sami's presidency was the provision of the instrument set. He persuaded Aesculap to provide a universal instrument set with which all basic neurosurgical procedures could be performed, and at a ridiculously low price of, I think, about $3,500 US. At that time, I contacted every neurosurgical training program in the United States, and many of them donated instrument sets to be distributed to places in need around the world. This is the instrument set then that was provided. These cartoons emphasize what we have understood of the plight of women. As a father of two professional-minded daughters, I can identify with this. And the WFNS got ahead of the curve here by establishing the Women in Neurosurgery Initiative, headed by initially Yoko Kato and then by Gail Russo, and which still has active, and they have a program I noticed at this meeting as well. And finally, how do we pay for all this? Well, the WFNS established a foundation headed at that time by Armando Basso, and which then helps to finance these things. Finally, Assistance Africa. This is Abdeslam Al-Kamlishi, the day that we took a helicopter trip over Victoria Falls, and he became the point person for the Assistance Africa initiative with the first reference center in Rabat. The purpose of the Assistance Africa was then to provide 5 years complete neurosurgical training, and it was 6 to 12 months training for those who trained in their own country, and with an annual scholarship of, in those days, $4,200. I don't know whether that may have changed by now. And I had the privilege of participating in some of the rounds in Rabat. You see there a younger-looking Abdeslam El-Kamlishi and Dr. El-Wahabi. And during one of those trips, my son and I had the pleasure of attending an excursion at Sheikh Ali, I believe it was, and we thought, well, we'd like to do as the Arabs do, and we got outfitted in jalabas and harem pants and so on, and of course our host came dressed in Western business suits, and there we were, Americans, in our outfits. So around about 2000, I met Arthur Labat. This is Arthur Labat on the left, and his wife Sonia. And Arthur had, the name Labat in Canada is synonymous with beer. The Labat had established a brewery, and Arthur chose not to follow the brewer's path. He became a money manager and made a lot of money at that, and has become one of the most important philanthropists in Toronto and in Canada. And Arthur was referred to me when he had a brain tumor. And he doesn't mind me sharing this with you. He talks about it himself whenever he can. And he had a meningioma on the lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus, and I had the privilege of removing that for him, at the conclusion of which he said, well, he'd like to do something that Richard would like. And so he donated $1 million, to which I then suggested we could establish a scholarship for African neurosurgeons to come to train in Toronto. Arthur had some experience. He'd ridden a camel. He had supported this initiative in Africa, and so he was entirely amenable to the idea. Initial donation was $1 million, which was a year too late to establish an endowed chair. So shortly thereafter, another $1 million was donated to establish the Labatt Endowed Chair for International Education in Neurological Surgery. And these are some of the elements of that chair. And we have, during that interim, this is Dr. Hassan, who is the first chair. Dr. Hassan here outfitted in his obligatory Toronto Maple Leafs hockey jersey, just so he can prove that he really was in Toronto. And the difference in this training fellowship is that most fellowships in North America, you stand about 3 or 4 deep, way at the back, peering over everyone's head to see what's going on. The Labatt Fellowship is a hands-on experience, so that you participate in conferences, you participate in the operating room. Seeing is believing, but feeling is a naked truth. And so they get first-hand experience with operations. And here's Dr. Hassan, his Maple Leaf jersey here. He subsequently met Arthur and Sonia Labatt. Our second fellow was Dr. Lassani, who during the 6 months that he was there, we happened to have three cases of sciatic schwannoma, and he published then on the gluteal lid approach to removing these tumors. And our third trainee is Sylvia Shitsama, who is now completing her 6 months, and will do so by December. So what's the next step? Well, there are a lot of places that have initiatives and that have tried to help in this regard, but there should be a synergy. We should bring all these potentials together to create, for example, a Labatt fellowship-trained neurosurgeon coming back at the time that there happens to be a WFNS educational course in his home city, armed with an instrument set with which he can practice, and perhaps with a volunteer to provide backup to smooth the way during his first 6 or 12 months of practice. So hopefully some leaders on the horizon, such as, for example, Dr. Russo, might have the initiative to put this all together and provide even more synergy and more benefit for African neurosurgeons. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you very much. We will discuss the whole session at the end. Now I will introduce Gay Rousseau, who will speak. You all know her. Her efforts in global neurosurgery are published and well known, and she is working very hard for the World Federation. So just give us an overview of global neurosurgery in 2019. Gail? Good morning. I saw you going around.
We just need to get the first slide up. invited me here today. Many old friends, many new friends, but putting together a world-class congress like this, when the participants are coming from all over the world and the organizers are coming from multiple different societies, is not easy. And I think it's a great proof of how well and how far we can work together. So thank you so much for the invitation and congratulations. So you're familiar with the Lancet Commission report on global surgery that came out in 2015. And what I would like to show you today is what's happening right now in 2019, but just 4 years of history, because you'll see that within the last 4 years, your specialty, neurosurgery, has become extraordinarily involved in a global effort that was launched by the publication of the Lancet Commission report in 2015, which identified the fact that there are more than 5 million unmet emergency and essential neurosurgical operations each year, and that means that we are every day worldwide operating at a deficit of 23,000 neurosurgeons. So what have we done about this? Neurosurgery recognized that this landmark publication that spurred the unanimous adoption of a UN resolution to address this problem, we recognized that neurosurgery needed to respond to improve access and education. So these are the things that we have done. And most importantly, I think we've changed the culture, because I know when I trained, my responsibility, I think many of ours, was thought to be to learn how to take the best possible care of the patient directly in front of you. But now we have an additional core responsibility. In addition to taking care of that patient in front of us, we also now consider it our duty to advocate for access to high-quality neurosurgery for everyone, everywhere. And so global neurosurgery, just since 2015, has become a rapidly emerging focus of study and of practice for neurosurgeons, and many more neurosurgeons, you see some of them here, at the first organizational meeting that was just in 2018 at Cornell that looked at the departmental, at the increasing number of neurosurgeons who are identifying global neurosurgery as a personal or departmental area of concentration. And I really have to give hats off to our WFNS president, Franco Cervidai, who has done so many things and put things in place just in the last 2 years that have really made a difference. For instance, when the WFNS AC meets, there is an accompanying meeting. So it's not an educational meeting. It's no longer a sterile business meeting, but there's education and local people are involved. There's partnership with local and regional societies, such as the meeting in Belgrade, which was a WFNS symposium, or likewise the WFNS symposium in Kuala Lumpur. There's a very active Young Neurosurgeons webinar series that many of us have participated in. And there's a huge amount of support of local and regional meetings, like at the Romanian Congress. And Dr. Cervidai is not alone. There's been vision, action, and champions from around the world, but because I was asked to give some notes about what's going on in North America, I want to thank these people, many of whom are friends of yours, who are past presidents, largely, of the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, and who have really made a difference by bringing global neurosurgery to the forefront and having major plenary sessions about this topic, just as you are doing, and also inviting editorials like the one you see there that I wrote. So many people were surprised, and I was frankly delighted to see that the Cushing orator at our AANS meeting this year was the president of the World Bank. He was a physician, Dr. Jim Kim, but he's also someone who can really make a difference in terms of pushing the political leaders who, after all, are responsible to an electorate and who define the health systems in which we all work. And I'm just sharing with you a slide that here that was shown by the World Bank president at the AANS meeting. This is a just global neurosurgery PubMed search since 1995, and you can see there's just been an explosion of things, and you need only open your own journals to see that. And there's been a major effort in publication. So from Neurosurgical Focus, which identified papers and committed an entire issue to global neurosurgery, to the consensus statement that came about as a result of the WFNS and the Global Neurosurgical Outcomes Group, the NIHR in the UK. We have amazing steps forward that are happening as a result of global neurosurgery. And I think this is really important. This is not meant to be some type of neo-colonialism, but I draw your attention to this article from the New England Journal of Medicine, where Ben Wharf, in working in Uganda, was able to get to the crux of how to best treat post-infectious hydrocephalus, and then is leading the way for developed countries to learn how to better treat young people who have hydrocephalus in a way that they can be shunt-free. And then finally, we have a neurosurgical delegation that works with political leaders that attends the World Health Assembly every year in Geneva. And on your upper right there is our report from the 72nd Assembly, which was just 3 weeks ago. And I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested. So there's been a major evolution in training. You've heard a little bit about FIENS, which was started 50 years ago, and at that time, it was a way of having individual neurosurgical volunteers go to individual sites. But now the emphasis is more on bilateral partnerships, so that residency programs in the developed world partner with residency programs in the developing world for the mutual benefit and education on both sides. Likewise, in April, so just 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago actually, we hosted the first ever Train the Trainers course at the AANS meeting, so that we have oversubscribed a group of both older neurosurgeons and young neurosurgeons who want to make global neurosurgery and global neurosurgical practice part of what they do. And so they came to this one-day practical course to learn how to be the best possible volunteers that they can be. And that course was taught by people from both developing and developed countries. So that course has sort of set the way for a WFNS-EANS collaboration, which I'm delighted to say will be held on May 15th of 2020 at Carl Schaller's lab in Geneva, coincident with the next World Health Assembly. And then for those of you who are interested in, again, bilateral exchanges, I want to draw your attention to Intersurgeon. You can take out your phones right now because it has a mobile app. But Intersurgeon is an internet pairing site started by neurosurgeons, but now evolving to include all surgical specialties, that takes someone, say I was talking with Ignatius this morning, who's a young neurosurgeon, trained by Africa 100, who's going to start practicing in northern Cameroon. He needs equipment with the WFNS Foundation can provide, but he may also benefit from having neurosurgical volunteers come for a week or 2 or 3 to be able to have a focused practical on operating together. And that's exactly what Intersurgeon does. So I encourage you, go to that site. It's been powered by the G4 Alliance, which is, G4 stands for the 4 surgical disciplines: surgery, OB, traumatology, and anesthesiology. And this is the major group that interfaces with global surgery at the World Health Assembly and beyond, in order to have all of our disciplines work together that require critical care areas in the hospital to be up to standards, such as ICU, ERs, transport systems, and so forth. I'm just showing you a sample or a part of a presentation that was given in Belgrade to see what we're trying to do through the help of the second vice presidents of the WFNS. So this was a report for what North America is doing to try to have collaborations in education and in service. And we divided them gave these templates to the second vice presidents of the WFNS so they could report back to us in Belgrade on academic partnerships, professional associations or organizations that are helping neurosurgery, governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, and industry and other organizations. So this is not meant to blow horns or anything like that, but it's just to show how many academic programs in North America have found that there is a real need for them to have a global program. So all of these organizations that you see listed here are neurosurgery residency programs that have partnered with another neurosurgery residency program to the mutual benefit of both. And that's really important. I'll just show you a couple. University of Alabama works in Vietnam. They have an astounding virtual reality platform so that they can help walk people through surgery during difficult cases. They also recognize that in order to have an effective system, you need not only well-trained neurosurgeons, but well-trained OR nurses and ICU nurses, so they've developed a collaboration there. And Jim Johnson was part of starting Intersurgeon. At Weill Cornell, they have had a long-standing association with Dar es Salaam, and they've now had a TBI registry in Tanzania for a very long time, and they sponsor global educational programs at the Dar es Salaam site every year. The University of Toronto, where Professor Perrin works, has really been a leader, and I want to, I've put the pictures of Jim Rutka and Mark Bernstein at his institution, who also have been very important collaborators in this. But I want to draw your attention to this tenure track in global surgery. This is hugely important because when one can develop a career in global neurosurgery, a tenured track, what that means is it's no longer the humanitarian neurosurgeon who just on their vacation decides that they want to help, or out of their own salary wants to bring someone over. This recognizes that global neurosurgery is an academic discipline, and it has the same pathways to full tenured professorship at Toronto, just like skull-based surgery or vascular or any other subspecialty. Dr. Rutka is very amenable to sharing that document, so I have it, or any of you who want to write to him, he will share that. But that makes a big difference to those who would like to be able to do more of this in their practice. And we've already mentioned Fiends and Robert Dempsey, and Fiends has been a clearinghouse for useful information for a growing number of partnerships for a very long time. So Stanford University and the American College of Surgeons started this template for humanitarian surgery courses that I mentioned earlier, that the AANS has run and now the EANS will run. I know South America, Africa, and Asia also would like to have a course that helps train the trainers, and we're in the process of developing those. At the University of Miami, they were on site in Haiti before the Haitian earthquake. We can be so proud of our fellow neurosurgeons there who are really working diligently to resurrect the entire civil society, and this is a neurosurgically led effort. And at my own institution, there's efforts globally in Vietnam and Panama, and we're developing the GW Global Surgical Alliance as an independent institute. Now, in the United States, you also have neurosurgeons who work in private practice, but who have global visions and are very academic. I've listed just a few of these, but let me bring the example of Edie Zussman, who is chief of neurosurgery at North Bay Medical Center, north of San Francisco, but she's their international medical director and has been involved in epilepsy and blood pressure, stroke prevention screening throughout Nigeria, working with Raji Mahmood and others. And then finally, although we are agnostic, all of us as neurosurgeons, about the role of religion and caring for our patients, we must recognize that faith-based organizations throughout the world have been charged with caring for people forever. So we work with those and with industry and with all these professional associations. There are also major grant recipients of the Fulbright and the Gates, who are our young neurosurgical pipeline. So as I conclude here, there are regulations affecting training that we've been able to pass so that neurosurgery residents no longer have to do global rotations while on vacation. The Harvard program in global surgery is leading the way for helping nations and neurosurgeons develop national surgical, obstetric, and anesthesia plans. And I'm so proud that our own Tariq Khan from Pakistan, right here in the second row, has been involved in Pakistan, and that makes an enormous difference. So that at the ICRAN meeting that will be happening in November of this year, this entire policy document will be presented so that what neurosurgeons know needs to be in every nation's plan for trauma prevention and care will be incorporated. Mission to Heal is a mobile surgical unit we'll be working with in Kenya, and our next steps are these here. But I'll just conclude by saying that there are exciting opportunities for future funding and partnership, and I'm so pleased to be here with all of you and to see this next phase of global neurosurgery forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. As I told you, we will have a short discussion at the end. Now, Professor Tariq Khan from the Northwest University of Pakistan, who is the chair of the Neurotrauma Committee of the World Federation, will speak about neurotrauma care in developing countries.
Good morning. Thank you, Franco. Thank you, Abdul Samad, for inviting me to this very important conference. Right. Okay, and thanks to the organizing committee as well. So I'm going to talk about neurotrauma care in developing countries. This is where I work in Peshawar, Pakistan. As we know that there's a large number of unmet surgical needs in the world, and as you can see, 74% of surgeries for TBI are needed in lower and middle income countries. Same goes for spinal trauma. A very large number are required. Again, all of them are from the lower and middle income countries. So as Gail said, that we need 23,000 more neurosurgeons for the world, mostly from the lower and middle income countries. But that's not the only problem. We have a lot of other problems. We need to look at them and try and find the solutions. Like we have huge traffic problems. There are a lot of laws, but people are not obeying them. We are trying to make world records on sitting on motorbikes. As you can see, the large number of people there. And we think that one helmet will protect the whole family. And you can imagine all these little children who are going to get accidents. Traffic chaos in all our places. And if you look at the study which we did with the Asian Australasian Society of Neurosurgeons from 4 countries, including Pakistan, Indonesia, and India, that the seatbelt users and the helmet users, there's very few of them in the world, in the lower and middle income countries. Then we have sports, such sports which make us fall from heights. And we have this gun culture where we grow up with guns in my region and in Afghanistan also. And unfortunately, then we have terrorist attacks, as you saw recently in Sri Lanka, in Colombo. So all these factors are a great burden on the already overstretched places. So as you know that the WHO said that 2 million lives could be saved per year by strengthening trauma care systems, including pre-hospital care and transport, and initial care in the emergency departments, definitive hospital-based care, and long-term rehabilitation. So we looked at what were the important things which were required for lower and middle-income countries and how we could help that. And so the pre-hospital care, the ER care, ICU care, rehabilitation, then very important neurotrauma registry, neurotrauma guidelines, and prevention of neurotrauma. So we looked at who provided emergency treatment at the scene of injury, and we found that it was passerbys who were the ones who were looking at the trauma. They were the first responders there. And fewer ambulances and fewer manned ambulances. And when we looked at, again, the survey from the Asian Australasian Society, did a nurse and doctor accompany the patient? So in majority, no. And we have ambulances with just a stretcher in it, really nothing else to help the patient during the transfer, which is a very important period. So training the paramedics who are in the ambulances, first to get the paramedics in the ambulances. And also a program has been started by one of our colleagues from Jaipur, Professor Sinha, who is training the shopkeepers along the highway to try and be the first responders in case of accidents there. Of course, we need to push the government to develop these ambulances with all the facilities in it. Now in many countries they are available, but also unfortunately the culture of the patients, the people, has to be developed that they have to ask for an ambulance, and it should be explained to them that the time taken for the ambulance to get to the site and taking the patient would be better than putting them in a car and taking them to the hospital. Of course, developing trauma care centers and developing intensive care units where these head injuries can be treated. So the first responders, the pre-hospital care is very, very important, the most important, and then in the ER and ICUs, of course, are important. Rehabilitation, something which is not available in lower and middle income countries at all, or very little. And I'm sure even in the highly developed countries, it is very expensive to give rehab to patients with head trauma. And in the study, again, we found that majority of the patients are being sent home to their families to look after the tracheostomies and the catheters and the nasogastric tubes. So we need to work on developing rehab services. And one idea which we are following, and there's a paper in World Neurosurgery on that, is to do a formal training for the family members so that they can, when they go home, they can look after these patients with the severe head injuries. Data systems in most countries in the LMICs are very poor, and they rely on police data. So I think neurotrauma registries are very important. I just give you a small thing of what our registry is doing to see the age groups, that mostly young patients are involved in road traffic accidents. And the time from injury to presentation to hospital, you can see, is quite large because of the poor ambulance services and the poor roads. That's just a diagnosis. And that's the mild to moderate TBI patients. So the Global Neurotrauma Outcome Study, an initiative from Cambridge, Angela Scolias, and of course the WFNS, and they have, I think, nearly completed a snapshot study, which was given to every hospital to collect data for 1 month. And this is going to move forward into developing an international neurotrauma registry. And I think that would be a very big step to develop collaboration and to develop writing papers and data from all countries, including the lower and middle income countries. Guidelines. We know that we have got guidelines internationally. We've got guidelines in developed countries. No guidelines are available in many of the lower and middle income countries. We need to work on that, and the WFNS Neurotrauma Committee has tasked a group which is working on them, and presently they're being tested in Colombia. And also something very important when the patient is discharged home, to give them a document where they understand that if there's a problem, that the patient can be brought back. But the most important thing is prevention. That's the most important aspect we need to look at, and we, the Neurotrauma Committee of WFNS, have been working on that. We in Peshawar, Pakistan, have been doing regular seminars and walks, poster competitions, and we have developed a course for one of the bachelor's programs in a home economics college where they go regularly to school children and teach them about prevention of neurotrauma. Most recently, last year, we have collaborated, the Neurotrauma Committee has collaborated with the Think First International. Gail is part of that program. And we have opened the first chapter in Pakistan here. So I just want to show you how, when the people's will and the law gets together, how they can implement strategies. A group in the United States, the WHO and the Vietnamese government got together and they developed special helmets with pores in them and cheap helmets. And they ordered everybody that from a certain date they are going to have, everybody's going to have helmets. And this is what happened all of a sudden overnight. And you would be amazed that thousands of lives were saved and also thousands of injuries were reduced because of this helmet law. So I think it has to be the will of the government and also teaching the people also regarding that. So as Gail said, the WFNS Neurotrauma Committee and the Harvard Group led by Key Park have developed comprehensive recommendations for management of brain and spine injuries. Now, these are right starting from the prevention up to rehabilitation, and these are policy recommendations for the governments of lower and middle income countries. And I must tell you that since we have started our National Surgical Obstetric and Aesthetic Plan in Pakistan, we have been able to piggyback these recommendations onto the NSOAP, and hopefully that will be part of those recommendations for NSOAP, and we can maybe the neurosurgical, which is idea is that 80% of the world has access to essential neurosurgical care by 2030. 80% of the world is within 4 hours of a neurosurgical center by 2030. 90% of LMICs with National Neurotrauma Plan in place by 2021. A very ambitious plan, but so starting with the launching of the Peshawar recommendations in November in the ICRAN, and then global neurosurgical sessions that are happening. AANS practice of global neurosurgery as a category, and world neurosurgery doing more with less. And this is a timeline, hope to culminate with the WFNS meeting in Colombia. Another concept which has been developed by Russell Andrews is mass casualty centers to integrate both natural and unnatural disaster response into ongoing global healthcare systems, collaboration between developing and developed countries, between civilian and military resources, because military mostly has got a lot of resources for disasters and for prevention to treatment to rehab, and have global benefits by healthcare delivery, medical education, medical research, and poverty reduction. And 2 sites have been chosen, one in Chile and one in Peshawar, and we have already been in touch with the military commanders in Peshawar, and hopefully in November we're going to have a strategy meeting with them. It was to be in March, but were postponed. Our hospital is a WFNS collaborative center, and anybody who's interested from Africa wants to come and do short training for 3 months are more than welcome. I would also like to invite you to the ICRAN from the 14th to 17th November, and we are giving scholarships, free registration, free accommodation to 50 young neurosurgeons. Already we have got people from 5 continents, a faculty of up to 100 people, and more than 100 young neurosurgeons coming to this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tarek, for this nice talk, and I have the pleasure to introduce the last speaker, our stars. Of course, he is the president of our meeting, and he will, of course, he is very interested by global surgery, as you know, and he will speaking about bridging the gap in the global neurosurgery development of collaborative and integrative model for education and training in neurosurgery.
Thank you, Najia. Good morning, everybody, and once again, I thank the speakers for participation in this session, Global Neurosurgery session. It's become a constant and a routine, also a rendezvous in every international meeting. It's very important for all the neurosurgical community, but also it's very important for us as developed country and developing country, because it's very important to share the information worldwide. Neurosurgery has been, for the last decade, a long neglected sector of global health. Fortunately, there is a recent increase in awareness about its role in the whole surgical healthcare system. And there is also worldwide better understanding of the key role of the neurosurgery in the surgical system care, as I said. In 2015, the Lancet Commission on Global Surgery came with very alarming information. Access to surgical care is disproportionate worldwide, with 5 billion people who have no access to surgical care. 9 out of 10 people in low and middle income countries have no access to basic surgical care. And you can see here the loss in number of deaths, 18 million deaths due to lack of essential surgical care. And when we compare with the other disease, the surgical cases that lead to death, 3 times the number of deaths due to HIV, tuberculosis, malaria combined. This result has pushed the International Neurosurgical Committee to organize neurosurgery to address the disparities all around the world. And there have been numerous publications on global neurosurgery to try to understand the situation by giving a systematic review, but also by establishment of the current global neurosurgery workforce. And the concept of global neurosurgery, by the way, I think it went back to at least 2 decades, when the first survey in low middle income country in Africa was done to try to understand and to make some proposal to bridge the gap between Africa and the high income country. This concept of global neurosurgery now is familiar to almost all neurosurgeons worldwide. And this gave an extraordinary ascent to the movement. But still the question today, how to bridge the gap in neurosurgery by 2030. These different publications on global neurosurgery have shown that inequity in neurosurgery is more striking. And you see that these publications have shown that 5 million essential neurosurgical cases go untreated each year in low and middle income countries. And more than 23,000 additional neurosurgeons are needed to meet the current demand. Of course, the needs are more important and greatest in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Neurosurgical condition will result in $4.4 trillion gross domestic product losses by 2030. In sub-Saharan Africa, the first survey showed that it was 1 neurosurgeon for 8 million inhabitants. Today, we are 1 neurosurgeon to 2-3 million. So there is still many things to do to improve this situation. These situations and this awareness about global neurosurgery have led to many neurosurgeons worldwide to propose some actions And all this initiative as price-worthy. Most of them has been done by volunteers from developing country trained to help developed country to resolve this problem. The creation of WFNS Rabat Center in 2002 was the first multi-institutional program with the WFNS for Africa. It was 5 years for training Africa for sub-Saharan young African neurosurgeon. There is also the training neurosurgeon in other regional and local centers, Senegal, Algeria, Kenya, and other local training centers in Africa. But also there are many, many international neurosurgical collaboration between high incomes and the low middle incomes country, either through short-term visit, fellowship. Most are organized by either individual or single center initiative. And we found that many of these initiatives have divergent goals with no coordination and no information sharing problems, sometimes of sustainability. So the question today, if we want to completely bridge the gap between developed and developing country by 2003, which are the appropriate model to choose. And I try to review the current literature regarding the different education program, and we can see on the slides these are today the available model of neurosurgical education. You can go through either a residency training program in WFNS training centers, a local residency program in low and middle income countries. There are some fellowship in with short-term duration in high-income countries, short-term visit mission from high-income country to low-middle-income countries. Of course, a very important part of education through online neurosurgical curriculum. But these models have to be evaluated, and we have to be compared for their cost effectiveness, their role training, but also their sustainability. And I think that the ultimate goal of these models is to develop an independent and self-sustaining neurosurgical education program and practice locally. So as I went to the literature to see the point of view not only from the volunteers or the authors of these the different initiatives, but also the point of view of the countries that benefit from this initiative. And the first model of training is training neurosurgeon from low-middle income countries in high-income countries. Means that a neurosurgeon from Africa go to Europe or to the States for full training. These are many advantages for this model. The training is in high and volume neurosurgical center. Of course, the trainee benefits from high standard of neurosurgery, high quality of work, exposition to new techniques and advanced technology, and it is possible also that he can train in subspecialty. But there are some advantages of this model. The main advantage of this model is the brain drain phenomena, what has been reported in many publications. There is also the possibility of inappropriate training. It seems maybe strange, but the trainee is in a very sophisticated neurosurgical environment with different high-tech advanced technology he will never have at home. The second is that there is different neurosurgical spectrum from home countries, mainly between Europe, States, and some sub-Saharan countries. The challenges that face neurosurgeons when they are back home, they are not prepared to manage the shortage of resources, and of course, there is a higher workload and due to inappropriate environment. And there is considerable loss of investment, and this is an interesting paper that shows that immigration from sub-Saharan Africa cost $2.1 billion for these countries. And this is a paper who speak about that. The second model of education is neurosurgical missions from high incomes to low middle incomes countries. This is the most common model of international neurosurgical collaboration in the last 15 years. There have been many institutions involved in this process, and you can see all through from Europe, from Canada, United States, most of them to either Africa or Southeast Asia. And the program, generally, it's short-term visit, in 1-2 weeks. It's repeated 2-3 times per year. And the volunteer helped by healthcare assistance, surgical training, clinical resources, and assistance. There are some advantages. The mission provides service to patients and education to local surgeons, popularize neurosurgery and improve awareness. There's a positive experience for visitors and a creation of global neurosurgeon with awareness of global burden of neurosurgical disease. There are some limitations. There is no significant transfer of knowledge. This is the opinion of the neurosurgeon who benefits from this mission. Hire person on local faculty when the team leave the country. And there are some ethical challenges that has been raised in some publication. And the problem of the long-term assistance could be interpreted like a new colonization. And there, the last thing is very important, the cost effectiveness. The third model is train neurosurgeon in regional WFNS, the model of training resident and Rabat Referral Center. The training of sub-Saharan African neurosurgeon in their environment lead to very high retention rate. It's 100% in neurosurgeon trained in WFNS Rabat Center. And this is a full training with 1 to 2 year fellowship in European countries. And this is a very cost effectiveness and sustainable model. This is very attractive center for training and cost-effective model, and for there is high demand for young African surgeons. I will just keep this slide that has been presented by Professor Hamnishi, just to insist on the fact that during the training, the trainee had the opportunity to make 1 to 2 years training in a high-income country to be informed about the new technology. And this model is sustainable because this is a multi-institutional approach and collaboration. And this is the impact of this model on the evolution of neurosurgery in Africa with the creation of new local and regional training centers. The last model is the neurosurgical online education model. Its advantage that it's low cost widespread neurosurgical education. It's valid and cost-effective education support to improve theoretical knowledge. And the online education can be integrated in standard curriculum. Dr. Servadei made a very good paper on the different platform of this model. And there are some disadvantages. Limited interaction between participants, lack of resources, internet in some countries, and maintaining student engagement is difficult. Of course, it cannot replace the standard neurosurgical education. There are many methods, come see here, and platform of online education. If we want to choose between all these education models, there is a process of education, selection, assessment, and generalization of this model. First, you have to collect the data. Now, the data, most of them are now available. And then this has increased awareness of neurosurgical community. We know about the motto, one word, one neurosurgery. The neurosurgical community have to plan for efficient neurosurgical care, examine the different model, and then go to evaluation and assessment of the model regarding the cost effectiveness, role training, suitability, and if there is validation of one model can be generalized to other countries, and then come back to collection of data to see if this model is sustainable. This is exactly what it has been done for the model of Africa WFNS Rabat Center. The survey in 1998 gave the data, and then this was an increased awareness of the neurosurgical community about the problem. The setup of the first WFNS reference center, then have been the evaluation of the results regarding the cost effectiveness, the number of neurosurgeons trained, and this has been generalized to other African countries. So how can we bridge the gap in 2030? There are some challenges. If we have to train sufficient number to neurosurgeons, at least to reach the ratio to 1 to 500,000. But also, we have to update neurosurgical education program to fit the future needs. Neurosurgical spectrum is changing due to industrialization and to the adoption of Western life, and the incidence of major surgical conditions are higher than in low and middle income countries than high income countries, like traumatic brain injury, pediatric hydrocephalus, neurosurgical cases of epilepsy. And this is a very interesting paper which shows that what are the needs. And we have to modify our program to fit these needs. First, of course, we have to continue to reinforce the standard education to increase the number of neurosurgeons, but also to develop a training and in subspecialty, pediatric neurosurgery, spine surgery, vascular neurosurgery, functional neurosurgery, but also to develop cost-effective techniques like stereotactic procedure, clip-in aneurysm, endoscopic techniques, surgery for temporal lobe epilepsy, awake surgery for glioma. These are very cost-effective techniques, but of course, this needs a collaboration with international institutions from a high-income country. And if we want to bridge this gap, in countries with no residency training program, the priority is to train neurosurgery in essential and basic neurosurgery in WFNS African Accredited Center on a local center. In countries with local residency training program, we continue to encourage the recruitment of young neurosurgeons and to develop neurosurgery specialty and cost-effectiveness techniques. So this is an algorithm. As I said, in countries with no local training program and limited number of neurosurgeons, we have to increase the number of neurosurgeons and set up a new local training program in low and middle income countries. But in countries with already local training program and insufficient number of neurosurgeons, we have to increase the number of neurosurgeons in these countries, but also develop possibilities for subspecialties through fellowship and online education, short-term mission in high-income countries. The goal of these models is to get, at the end, a development of independent and self-sustaining neurosurgical practice and educational program in this country by 2030. So in conclusion, training neurosurgeons from low middle income countries in local and regional training centers is the most appropriate model of education. It's cost effective and sustainable. The development of neurosurgical specialty in countries with local training centers is mandatory through the short-term fellowship and surgical mission. The online education is widespread, valid support of standard neurosurgery learning, but can not replace it. International coordination and cooperation between WFNS, continental and regional neurosurgical association, charitable institution is important for information sharing and global strategy development. The strategy should be bridging the gap by 2030. And you can see here, this is Tangier. It's very close to Europe, and it's just 15 miles, and we are almost at the end to bridge this gap between the two continents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Al-Wahabi. I think what we'll do is continue the conversation over the coffee break, which should be ready now. So let's continue to do that. I'd like to thank all the speakers and all of you for your attention. See you at the coffee break.